There are new major developments in the Justice Department's criminal investigation of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And there's new reporting that federal investigators are asking questions about former President Trump and his efforts to subvert the election. Keep in mind, until now, there's been almost no sign that investigators were looking directly at the actions of Trump himself. Now, according to the Washington Post, prosecutors have asked hours of detailed questions about meetings Trump led in December 2020 and January 2021, his pressure campaign on Pence to overturn the election, and what instructions Trump gave his lawyers and advisors about fake electors and sending electors back to the states. In addition, Justice Department investigators in April received phone records of key officials and aides in the Trump administration, including his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Meantime, the New York Times is reporting on previously undisclosed emails among Trump advisors. They were discussing their scheme of fake electors, and they actually used the word fake. So there's a lot to digest here. Let's break it all down. And joining us now is Norm Eisen. He was counsel to the House Democrats during Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. He was also the Obama White House ethics czar. And Elie Honig is the CNN senior analyst and former federal prosecutor. Guys, it's always great to have both of you, especially together. Norm, let me start with you since you're right next to me. When you take a look at all this new reporting, what does it tell you about the focus of the DOJ investigation right now?
Well, Anna, clearly the fake electors scheme is at the center of the web of activities that they're looking at, because come on, you can't, these are official government documents. You can't falsify or forge or counterfeit an official government document.
It's hard evidence, too.
It is. It's a smoking gun. And then we have these emails where even the people who are organizing it are calling them fake electors. And we have the evidence from the 1-6 committee that Donald Trump was personally involved. That video, for example, from the chair of the RNC saying he asked her for her help in getting the fake electors together. And now we know from the Washington Post that these kinds of questions are being asked about Trump's involvement, as well as Mike Pence. He comes into this scheme because Trump wanted Pence, apparently, to use these phony certificates to blow up the January 6th meeting of Congress and block the genuine electors. So the strands of the story are starting to come together. That's what they're interested in.
And yesterday we reported how it was Pence's chief of staff, as well as another Pence aide who had testified before the DOJ. Today we're getting word that other White House officials have also been contacted by the DOJ. But Elie, even if the Justice Department is asking detailed questions about the former president's actions or about conversations with the former president, which the Washington Post is reporting, you say that doesn't necessarily mean Trump is a target, right?
Correct, Anna. So think of it as sort of different steps in the chain here. The first step is, are they asking questions about you? And I think what's really interesting about the new reporting is who is going into the grand jury. The fact that it's Mark Short and Greg Jacob, they are far closer, far more insiders than anyone who we know of who Donald Trump, who DOJ has spoken to so far. And of course, this morning, Alyssa Farah said on New Day that other White House officials are in contact with DOJ too. That's crucial. But you start with asking questions. If the investigation progresses to a certain point, then a person can become a target, meaning somebody who prosecutors believe is reasonably likely to be charged. Then you move on to an indictment. And then, of course, the biggest challenge of all is converting an indictment into a conviction. So this is important, but it is very, very preliminary.
But what would indicate then that Trump is a target? What are you watching?
Yeah, so it could be a couple things. DOJ sometimes sends people target letters saying, "Dear Donald Trump, we now consider you to be a target." There's some discretion in that. DOJ doesn't always do that, but that could be something that happens. We also need to watch who else goes in to testify in the grand jury. I'm sure we'll have more reporting in the coming weeks about who that is, what types of questions they're asking, perhaps. So it's sort of a holistic evaluation. There won't necessarily be any specific moment in time other than if there's a target letter between now and what might be, we don't know, but what could be an indictment.
Attorney General Merrick Garland keeps getting asked about indictments. He was just asked about a possible indictment of a former president or even a candidate for president. Take a listen.
We pursue justice without fear or favor. We intend to hold anyone who is criminally responsible for events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another accountable.
So I hear that, and I feel like that's just become his sort of go-to response. But Norm, I know you know Garland. You've known him for some 30 years. You say you hear a level of specificity in that answer.
I do, Anna. The lawful transfer of power. When he says he's going after anyone who interferes with the lawful transfer of power, we haven't heard those magic words before. Ellie is right. It's a mosaic of evidence. But you know, another way to think of that is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, when you're putting the jigsaw puzzle and the images start to emerge, all of this evidence, including Garland using these words for the first time, suggests to me there's one person who was, we know, in charge of attempting to interfere with that lawful transfer of power. It's the person who's most responsible under our Constitution and laws for the lawful transfer of power. We've never seen a person in this office do this before in the history of the United States. That's the President of the United States, the ex-President Donald Trump. So I think those were sharper words than we've heard before, pointing at Trump. Of course, Ellie's right. We have to see where we go from here. But I think the indicators are really pointing at severe legal peril for Donald Trump.
But what about timing here, Norm? Because obviously, this stuff always takes time. There's another election right around the corner. Merrick Garland seemed to indicate that there was no time frame that he was going to have to be pigeonholed to. But is there a time crunch?
Well, there's a pincers movement on Donald Trump, and the two pincers are moving at different paces. The federal investigation, I feel confident we're not going to see charges, if there are any, against Trump in 2022 because of the pendency of the political season. In Georgia, though, talk about target letters, we have a prosecutor, the DA Fani Willis, who's doing a parallel investigation because of the alleged wrongs in Georgia. They were severe. And that prosecutor has already issued 16 target letters to fake electors. That suggests she's moving more quickly. She said she'd like to wrap up this year. We may see something faster on the state level.
Let me bring this question to you, Ellie, because between the DOJ investigation and that investigation in Georgia and Fulton County, who do you think is better situated legally to criminally charge a former president if that were to happen?
Oh, that's a job for DOJ, in my view, both politically, practically, and legally. And let me explain why. First of all, DOJ has vastly superior resources and expertise. DOJ has over 10,000 federal prosecutors, the entire FBI and other federal law enforcement apparatus. The Fulton County DA, I admire the effort, but they have a grand total of about 50 attorneys. They do not specialize in complex fraud cases. But also, there's a really important legal wrinkle here. If a county DA, the Fulton County DA or any other DA, tries to indict a former president, the first move that former president will make is to go to the federal courts and say, no, you cannot do that under our Constitution. You can't have elected, partisan, local, county-level DAs indicting people for anything that touches on the presidency. Now, I know Norm's going to say, yeah, but that argument doesn't fly here. However, we don't know because it's never been raised. No one's ever tried to indict a former president. And beyond dispute, that's an argument that can only be made against a county-level DA. It's not an argument that can be made against DOJ. And that's why, in my view, DOJ is really uniquely situated. Only they have the institutional ballast, credibility, and I think legal standing to make this kind of case.
Norm, he teed it up for you. I'll give you the final thought.
Ellie, if DOJ has superior resources, why is Fani Willis so far ahead of them, including with those 16 target letters? The reason Ellie knows what I'm going to say about his legal wrinkle is because he and I have often discussed it off camera. There is no federal immunity for a purely political attempt to interfere with an election. And you left out an important point, my friend, and Ellie is my very good friend. We consider ourselves the general counsel department for Anna.
It's true.
On the political front, prosecutor in Atlanta is much further away from Joe Biden. Merrick Garland and DOJ are in more proximity. He, after all, is the AG of Donald Trump's opponent. So there's a political advantage to moving in Georgia. She's a very determined, effective prosecutor. She's brought the cases like this before with the Atlanta teachers cheating scandal. I think she can do the job, and I think she'll do it first.
A close ally of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has resigned, comparing his recent comments on race to the Nazi era. Mr. Orban had described Western Europe as a mixed-race world, saying Hungarians should only mix with other Europeans. Live to Nick Thorpe now, who joins us from Budapest. Nick, good to see you. Viktor Orban often talks about race, but has he ever taken it this far?
Not quite, no. He does seem to have gone further this time. He's often spoken in the past about Hungary as a culturally homogenous country, but not so much as an ethnically homogenous country. And what's, I think, sort of made this particular advisor to him, she's actually the Commissioner for Social Inclusion. She's of Jewish background herself. What made her explode and hand in her resignation is that really he went much further. He seemed to be suggesting that Hungary is somehow ethnically pure, or that at least ethnically, racially wise, that Hungarians should not mix with people from outside Europe. And clearly that's gone further than he has before, and it was just too much for this particular minister.
So it's a blow to him that she's resigned, Nick, but what's Viktor Orban said since those comments? Does he in any way acknowledge that they're racist?
No, he doesn't. He replied personally to her, and after all, this is a close friend of his, one of his inner circle, and this is a country where people on the whole do not criticise Mr. Orban from his own camp. He's used to criticism from the liberal, from the left side, from Brussels, from the European Union and beyond, but he's not used to this kind of criticism from inside. Mr. Orban defended himself very fiercely. He said, look, you've worked with me for 20 years. You know very well that I'm not an anti-Semite, that I'm not a racist. What's interestingly, though, is that she has since replied to his letter, and this is sort of adding fuel to the flames in a way, and adding to this debate in Hungary, because she has now become something of a media personality. She's getting a lot of airtime on media critical of the government, and she has said, look, this is the kind of speech which people didn't take into account in the 1930s when Hitler rose to power. This is the kind of speech which whips up feelings, whips up racism, even if the Prime Minister himself is not a racist in her view, and that can lead to genocide.
At some point in our lives, we've all witnessed somebody getting special treatment. Maybe it's a parent who has a favorite kid. Wasn't me. Or maybe you've been to a football game where the ref refuses to call a foul against the other team.
The 40. Oh, he's brought down hard by his face mask. What? Oh, come on, man. Get off your face mask. You're not going to call that?
I saw a clean tackle, sir.
What are you looking at?
And what about the teacher's pet? The kid who brought a shiny little red apple from home and left it under her desk.
Okay, listen, I didn't want to say this in front of the other kids because I didn't want to make them jealous, but I made a special position just for you. And it's the most important job of all. Band manager.
Special treatment runs rampant in Washington, but it only goes one way. Democrats are the darlings of D.C. They can do no wrong. Republicans, on the other hand, well, there's an entire system in place designed to destroy them. And it happens every day, right in front of our eyes. Just last night, Biden's Department of Justice leaked to the Washington Post, of course, that Donald Trump may be under criminal investigation. What for? Well, I mean, does it really matter? They'll figure it out later. The January 6th hearings still haven't presented hard evidence that Donald Trump committed a crime. If they had hard evidence, we would have seen it. The witness they said was the most explosive was a woman named Cassidy Hutchinson. Remember, she claimed Donald Trump lunged at a Secret Service agent and tried to grab the steering wheel on the Beast? Well, she was contradicted by the Secret Service. And tonight, we're learning even more about this so-called star witness. According to new messages obtained by the Federalist, before Hutchinson testified, she called the committee phony and blasted Republicans Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger as a crop of losers. But then when Hutchinson found out she might have to pay for a lawyer, she ran right into the arms of a Democratic law firm who set her up nicely. And now she doesn't ever have to pay for another drink in Washington again. Cassidy's like the new Alexander Vindman, except much better looking. You'll see her on CNN for at least a year, and she'll probably get a book deal. Meanwhile, if you're involved with President Trump, they raid your home, usually while you're in your underwear, put you in shackles and bankrupt your family. They don't need evidence. Their goal is to scare you into submission. Watch Merrick Garland last night on NBC flirt with arresting Donald Trump right before the next election.
You said in no uncertain terms the other day that no one is above the law. That said, the indictment of a former president, of a perhaps candidate for president, would arguably tear the country apart. Is that your concern as you make your decision down the road here?
Look, we pursue justice without fear or favor.
So if Donald Trump were to become a candidate for president again, that would not change your schedule or how you move forward or don't move forward?
Say again that we will hold accountable anyone who is criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next.
If they had half the evidence on Trump that they have on Hunter, Trump would probably already be in a supermax right now. It was interesting. The topic of Hunter Biden actually never came up in the Lester Holt interview. You'd think a journalist might have questions like, hey, AG, what's going on with Hunter? The president denied his son made money in China, but he's made millions there. And the president's on the record lying about it. Maybe do you think you should appoint a special counsel? No, never came up. The president of the United States is lying about his family taking in millions of dollars from the communist Chinese, being bribed with diamonds, and then Biden's going soft on the Chinese, and the attorney general's not wondering if the president's compromised? There's a paper trail. There's banking records. There's flags at Treasury, pictures. I mean, there's even voice recordings. The only evidence that Trump was compromised by the Russians was made up by the FBI, but they tried to charge him anyway. This is now the third presidential election in a row that the Department of Justice has interfered with on behalf of Democrats. In 2016, they framed Trump, and then when he was elected, they had an insurance policy, and Mueller's prosecutors spent 2 years rummaging through millions of documents in order to tee up impeachment, and Mueller failed. And then when Trump fingered Biden family corruption in Ukraine, they impeached him for that. Then whistleblowers came forward in October of 2020 saying the FBI stopped investigating Hunter Biden's laptop before the election. Orders came straight from the top, no questions asked. Even though agents knew the laptop was real, the Delaware repair shop where Hunter abandoned it handed it to the FBI in 2019, and they just sat on it. And then when the Post started to leak the story out, they put together an agency-wide scheme to bury it. Of course, the CIA got involved. Why wouldn't they? They labeled the whole thing Russian disinformation. Oh, and big tech and the mainstream media also did.
The U.S. authorities are seeing if those emails we just talked about are connected to an ongoing Russian disinformation effort.
It is so obviously a Russian operation.
Hunter Biden, this laptop that intelligence officials have warned is likely Russian disinformation.
When he's also then relying on Russian disinformation laundered through the New York Post, you get a sense of somebody who is just who's lost his instinct, who's lost the narrative.
Do you think stuff like that could just have been planted in there and be completely fake?
I do.
Now 2024 is around the corner and they're slow walking the Hunter probe, narrowing it down to just a little small tax beef. And are floating charging Trump with a felony so he can't run against Joe? Would they really put the former president of the United States in prison? They'd lock up the Republican nominee for president? Or do they just hold this dark cloud of imminent indictment over the guy to dirty him up in the Republican primary? I mean, do you really want to vote for a guy who could be going to jail? That's their strategy. How sinister and how deep does this go? They're going to try to convict Trump over January 6th without even telling us if they were involved in January 6th?
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
And we're seeing the DOJ and FBI openly conspire to protect Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, just locking up Republicans who ask questions. What's this really about? Donald Trump wanted to close the border, confront China, and stop policing the world. And that was a threat to the establishment and their profits. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he wants to police Ukraine's borders instead of ours and wants to let China raid our piggy bank. So they'll do anything they can to keep the guy in charge and imprison the renegade.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.